Hello, and welcome to Savepoints, cosmic lessons I've learned about life and myself by playing video games. My name is GoldVision, and although I don't necessarily admit it to everyone, I'm probably going to run for president when I'm old enough and get a cool enough pair of shoes. Until then, I'm glad you are here because I needed to share with you the lesson I learned very recently. A lesson that is embarrassing as usual, but relentlessly important. As any person trying to have fun and crunch through this shoe-centric world, regardless of when they leap relative to where they look, a person should always know the challenge. You may have heard the word or seen it somewhere, challenge from the Latin calumny, pluperfect nominative, philoprogenitive, and I don't see any connection personally, but maybe that's the challenge of etymology. The origins of challenge actually apparently meant to falsely accuse, evolving eventually into a difficult task, and then finally into whatever it means right now. As I waited for my morning coffee one fated Saturday morning to brew, I entered the Esamir continent in the world of Planetside. In Planetside 2, there is no restriction or explicit challenge, just an Orwellian prerogative that you have to fight for your cause in rockets and crosshairs and directives and experience points. But after all of these rule sets and walls of the sandbox, however, the challenge becomes gray. There are orders and missions, of course, unenforced. They're a guide to help you find the most significant battles taking place. They're like the hot sauce you add to your marinara. It helps you enjoy what you already have, but your spaghetti doesn't need it. There's no personal accountability for when your faction doesn't conquer the continent, or even if you disregard orders, so really how you spend your time is completely up to you. Or me, in this case, and as I was using Planetside to warm up to my day, I decided to embrace my orders and fly to my favorite base, Haven Outpost, to remove any invading forces, or to boil the water in what has, unfortunately for all of us, become an extended pasta metaphor. The Haven Outpost was under attack by the new conglomerate, the NC, not to be confused with North Carolina, or South Carolina, or any Carolina really. The NC were coming from the north in the Mani region of Esamir, and by they, I of course meant this one guy. Regarding my favoritism, it's just the way the base overlooks the general area, the main building kind of isolated from the world by an isolating trench around it for enemy players to park their isolated transport vehicles in. And as I fired an excess of rockets trying to blow up the unmanned harasser, hoping no one was watching the whiffs, I decided my self-imposed goal this morning was not to win or miss rockets, it simply was truly to live as long as possible. Is the simple act of living a challenge on its own? Some may say yes, especially in a war zone, country with a lower end GDP, or Los Angeles, and Planetside definitely took place in at least one of those. I had an underlying social obligation to keep fighting for the Vanu sovereignty, who I had now achieved 81 battle ranks with, their celebration of technology somewhat at odds with the fact that they hadn't yet invented landing gear. I precariously balanced my scythe on top of the base to seek the miscreants who were hiding within the base's confines. Fortunately, I wasn't the only VS operative to show up, and the conflict was resolved before I needed to do anything. Returning to the roof to wait for the full capture, I went to see a mag rider firing celebration shots up in the air, at which point I turned to look up in the sky, and we can all watch as I slowly realized that the target of the victory fire was a Reaver who would be the culprit in what would become a long-winded insurance claim for my destroyed aircraft. I wouldn't be able to exchange information with Trash D, or failing that, blow him out of the sky, and although I felt stranded at the Haven, I was inspired, like usual, by Nugjug to pull a lightning tank of my own. Although I'm sure it's not a hard and fast rule, I think that all players, or at least all the people on my team, or maybe only the ones on my team, should consider using vehicles to cross terrain regardless of how ill-equipped their tanks might be. Planetside's continental conflicts are never resolved by individual efforts, it's the teamwork that wins wars, and even the standard issue lightning tank provides a considerable amount of armor versus small arms fire and is simply safer than nothing. When I got to Mani Tower to throw in the noodles, salt, and oil, I would immediately contribute to our offense, missing my target. I was still warming up, of course. The second shot would prove true, whizzing past my target as intended. In fact, the 32 more shots I would fire over the next minute and a half would indeed kill no one, but I'd like to try unsuccessfully to convince you that the scary loud noises would cause more psychological damage than any actual injury might. 3 of those shots would miss or, let's say, scare a landmine I could not hit, and I would help destroy a few turrets, which would passively help our invading force and really clean out the barrel of my tank's armor-piercing gun, which is the second effort to protect my ego that I'm going to try to unsuccessfully convince you of. I would go to reload at the Haven Outpost's famous ammo terminal here, which was a perfect opportunity to retrieve my coffee and valiantly idle my tank, hoping that no passing aircraft would clean their anti-tank barrels at it. I hadn't really achieved anything so far. I had destroyed an empty vehicle and some turrets, but for the sake of my intended challenge, I was finding a passive success. I still define fun as doing what you want to do, weighing the precarious balance of personal desires and socially inflicted ones, trying to score a goal or destroy an inhibitor versus grinding money or getting the high score. And both of these socially inflicted desires were actually features of another free game I'd played this day. Per the suggestion of Rock Paper Shotgun, I tried out Landside McQueen. The only suggestion at the initiation of the game was to to press space, and after I finally found it on my keyboard, I chose to sled Mr. McQueen's suitcase straight down the hill, ending up at the crosswalk and crashing into pedestrians. This action would be tabulated as score, the challenge would be mine to decide. Pressing space was the only literal direction presented. Getting a higher score was entirely up to the player and his or her endless quest for blood, or in this case pedestrian side. I would play a few more times, and when I broke an impressive 90,000 points, I would tweet my score to be the envy of all the Twitter people who were also logged in, following me, and looking at their feed within the window of time that the tweet would be relevant. Except I would learn it was an absolutely terrible score with high scores malupling mine. I jumped back into the game to try to do better, hitting the sick jump and a couple of business people, but I couldn't seem to perform much better. I gave it considerable and reasonable thought for about all of 2 seconds, and then immediately accused all of these players of cheating and probably changing some of the DLLs and default files in the game directory. This is a very high number. I don't understand. When I went to change the DLLs myself, I realized I didn't know how to change dynamic link libraries in any meaningful way, and I went back into the game to try to improve my score the old-fashioned way. I was doing significantly better, but I was still eons away from the high scores, and in critical analysis, I realized the score seemed to stop tabulating a few moments after I crossed into the major intersection. At some point, I discovered I could stop Mr. McQueen's sledding entirely by sliding between the tires of the construction vehicle, and by waiting for all the pedestrians to crop up at the bottom, I created significantly better collisions, amplifying my personal high score each time. Eventually, I achieved a score half that of the lowest high score or the highest low score, depending on how you look at it. The points gained would double for each consecutive knockdown, and I in fact learned how to do this so well that I overflowed the score variable, resulting in an overwhelming negative billion. I tweeted this as well, and as it seemed the scorekeepers were adamant about keeping me irrelevant, I would not bother trying to compete in their unjust realm any longer. The challenge presented really was to press space. After that, getting a high score or negative low score, or knocking over someone or knocking over no one were all personal challenges, up to the player to decide. The score kept wasn't how many people were knocked down, but how many of them I could knock down within an arbitrary window of time from the moment I crashed until the game stopped tabulating. I had knocked down too many people apparently, and if we're playing arbitrary challenges, then I had crafted enough of my own to fully enjoy the extent of this free game. And besides, there was a much easier fan fiction style way to get on the scoreboard. Returning to the base, I still hadn't killed anyone, which is the standard of success in some games, but fortunately now I was fueling up with coffee and its subsequent coffee powers. I was to continue my efforts towards controlling the territory in spite of our low population, and I would finally get my first kill. This action had a surprisingly volatile effect. Immediately thereafter, my tank suffered what I'm going to call warmonger karma, damage and caught on fire in spite of its turret's cleanliness. I escaped the vehicle only to enter a much more dangerous infantry firefight, barely surviving against Bandit 1379, thanks only to my overshield, and I moved to fight off Love and Hate before he could drop explosives on Door 20's Mag Rider, and then I very bravely ran to cover. As I hoped whoever was drawing the line between bravery and cowardice was also watching my health bar, I reloaded and recovered. I was cut off from my allies now on the other side of the base, and traditionally began firing off anti-aircraft gel rockets, giving them the same names of the children I someday intend to have. Gramplesnort, my future firstborn, went straight for the target but was distracted by Morris's flares and flew off into the sky. Brigglebop, my second, faced the same fate, although he didn't really have a chance as the flares were fired almost immediately. As I watched a helpless Sunderer prepare for the worst and be destroyed by the worst, I decided to slink around to the north side of the base to find cover and to try to add some oregano to the sauce we were all heating up. The rocket named after my third intended son, simply the letter F, maybe a backwards F, went after Davy Crockett, and although no one got hurt, he found his target, granting me a reaver kill. My fourth rocket would be a random number generated daily according to an algorithm. He was dead fired into an enemy turret to help destroy it. As I was snooping about the base's perimeter, I had the inclination to look up only to see a light assault trooper fail testing his jetpacks. His test complete, I tried to propel him back up into the air, netting me almost too easy of a victory. Feeling simply in the right place at the right time, I accepted the points in the compliment, while not sure, like always, how to respond. Soon thereafter, Manny Tower would be officially captured, one of the 3 sub-bases of Manny Biolab, stamping the Wildcards logo on and flipping all the equipment to Vanu Mauve. I would resupply at a ground terminal and move my way up in the tower, ready to pick up another scythe. At no moment was I safe. I've seen enemy infiltrators hanging out in bases they no longer belonged in, like the metaphorical bay leaf that had overstayed its welcome. I hadn't died yet, which was really my only goal, and as I wandered from base to base, I felt as though I was doing something wrong. Although I appreciated the fact that I could choose whatever I wanted to do, I was still not choosing the deadliest conflicts, and that felt like cowardice. Debating challenge and its value made the thought process harder than ever. Was challenge just doing what I was told, no matter what it was, and being rewarded for it? Was it picking my own battles and filling up the progress bars I was most interested in? Was challenge murdering rebellious scoundrels to collect a new hat? Or was it just trying to get out of hyperspace before an Imperial ship scanned my illegal cargo? Or was challenge just being abused by RNG until it tells you you've won? Was challenge a choice, or was it the removal of choice? Was it success if not earned, or was it still a challenge even if I failed, while having a wonderful time and growing momentously as a human being? Some games don't even offer the opportunity to fail. Fantastic Contraption is a virtual reality reality title for the HTC Vive, where the player, who is represented by this dog-shaped dog person, must create a kind of transport vehicle to make one object to collide with another, a kind of antithesis of the self-driving car goal. The challenge seemed straightforward enough, especially in the earlier levels, and when I jumped into VR, someone I had given a demo to had built a contraption that worked upon pressing play. I hadn't done anything but was rewarded with a success, the success dog who grants the admission to the next level, and a whole accomplishment without any effort at all. In theory, I was having fun because I was succeeding. Assuming winning only as rewarding as the effort I put in, I tried my hand on the next level I believe was called Inconvenience Island. I switched to first-person VR view to see there was not one this time but 4 destination targets up in the air. As I tried not to smack my arms into my invisible actual walls, I started to work on a machine that would spin around wildly and erratically, ideally wobbling the orb to all 4 of the misaligned targets. I would spend over half an hour attaching sticks to wheels to balloons to sticks, watching them spin in all the wrong ways test after test of failed attempts, and even with the map facing me directly, I could only manage to hit 3 of the bubble blocks until I realized that only 2 minutes in during the very first test I had activated the only block I needed to advance the level, the success dog appearing and being ignored throughout the entire remaining construction process. Dodging any comments about animal neglect, in effect I had won. I had completed the proposed challenge, but my entertainment had come from building the machine I wanted to. The bizarre self-loading auto trebuchet was an engineering marvel, and the joy I found in the game came from building it, not from, quote, winning or succeeding. I hit the success state without much effort at all, and advancing I was immediately given another problem to solve, but I had to ask if the challenge presented or the need to advance was as entertaining as the challenge I gave myself. 350 nanites later I was flying over Esamir again, and following anti-air tracers I discovered a battalion of at least 3 enemy aircraft. I marked as many as I could for the rest of my team using the Q key and then set off into the sky, very bravely fleeing away from my equally matched opponents into the air to hunt vulnerable, unsuspecting enemies on the ground. I flew between the biolab and the Manny Lake satellite base, only to miss the already overwhelmed defender surrounded by my teammates and then immediately fall directly into a tank's anti-aircraft crosshairs. I confidently boosted completely safely away from him and right into another Skyguard's crosshairs, firing off my second rocket before my scythe did its impression of a pocket vaporizer. In a panic, I scrambled to name the rockets Jimmy, inspired by Better Call Saul, Jimmy from Jimmy Neutron, and Jimmy after Jimi Hendrix, and Plamped, because everyone knows you shouldn't have more than 3 Jimmys. As I destroyed the tank, it would be my last hurrah for this life. I would be shot in the back by an infiltrator, Luchador Cancerbero, who had used his running somersault plancha and tossed me out of the ring. In the end, my life was only 19 minutes long, I had chosen harder and harder challenges, risking more and more, and the beautiful thing about video games is the opportunity to be conscious of death, and the ability to analyze and recount the decisions that brought me to it. Looking back, I'm forced to admit that it was a slight cowardice that led to my demise. Disregarding points and directives, the opportunity to battle other aircraft would have been the fine Chianti to pair with this conflict I had helped to prepare. The amount of enemies present would have likely been overwhelmed by friendly forces. I had balked the personal unique challenge to instead go into bully mode, hunting land targets, and as a result my choices were reduced over and over again until I was completely done. The recipe had been prepared and served. My desire to prepare an experience worth enjoying led me to really appreciate the things that were happening as they were. I got points, which of course were wonderful, but I tend to enjoy games that value experience over points. The experience of celebrating each consecutive moment of survival was a taste that not everyone might appreciate, but it is certainly something I'd recommend for those with a discerning palate. I could have obviously survived indefinitely by avoiding risks altogether, and could have died much more quickly if I had searched for the deadliest combat. Over all of this analysis, I've realized finding the sweet spot of achievement versus survival is the challenge, acknowledging the skills and resources I have in the moment. Essentially, every challenge is arbitrary in every game, whether it be to survive to the end of the zombie apocalypse, knock over a certain amount of pedestrians to build a fantastic contraption, or to throw burgers at your grandchildren. It's up to the player to pick the framework that best aligns with who they are and what they want to do. The karma seemed to be very balanced throughout my day. My empty vehicle was destroyed while I was focused on an objective. My first act, injuring another, was immediately met with injury on my own person. After I went to modify the game files, I was given a score that might as well have been a runtime error. My aircraft destroyed by inescapable anti-aircraft fire, and I was finished off by a player who was simply in the right place at the right time. The tendency to notice karmic balance is another reason to perhaps look at the challenge most relevant to the moment, valuing intention more than anything else. There is certainly not going to be an absence of games available in the coming days, so more than ever players should really analyze the worlds they're planning to invest their time and money into at the top of the list before they overanalyze the graphics or ask what gifts they're going to get with the special edition pre-order. I believe it's in the best interest of all of us if we all yearn to know the challenge. My name is GoldVision. I used the lightning tank with armor-piercing cannon, the Orion light machine gun, the Day Trader metal suitcase sled, the flower selector handles, the Nemesis VSH-9 gel rocket launcher, the Hornet missiles for the scythe, and the Cosmic Lessons spray paint. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to follow/hate me on Twitter, and remember to keep things golden.